the growth mindset is the undergirding of building mental fitness. And so we're going to jump right in to that and move us along. For those who may or may not know me, Amy just introduced me, so I'm not going to go into all of the credentials and things, but I've been working in and for law firms and lawyers for over 30 years. So I've kind of done all that, been there, done that, written the books, spoken, podcast host, a couple of folks I've hosted here on our Changemaker podcast, as well as our Secret Sauce Marketing Tastings podcast. I developed a love of working with women lawyers after having worked 20 years in-house at 3 corporate law firms in the Philadelphia region, and saw firsthand at the momentous challenges that they confront, much more than they're different than their male counterparts. And so it's been my joy and pleasure to coach and guide them along their way to create the career of their dreams by charting their own course. So we're going to take a look at mental fitness and what that means and how the undergirding is a growth mindset. So the foundation here is, what is the growth mindset? We know through the study of neuroscience that we have one or the other. There's fixed mindset or there's a growth mindset. The fixed mindset looks like the following, and the voices and the talk that the self-talk that we have, and that is, I'm not good at this, I'm really bad at this, or I've always been this way and I really can't do anything about it because this is just the way it is. This is just the way I am. That is a fixed mindset that we are navigating and traveling in a very narrow version of our perceived reality. The growth mindset, on the other hand, looks like, I may not know, but I can certainly learn, or I'm open to try, or I'm open to new experiences and to, expanding what I currently now know. That's an example of the growth mindset. When we have the growth mindset, it is the equivalent to helping us build mental fitness. And so what do we mean by mental fitness? These slides. Okay, mental fitness, and we're going to talk about this, is how to grow 3 core mental muscles to thrive in challenging times. And there's been so much study on this body of work. Mental fitness can be also defined as the capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive, i.e. growth, rather than negative mindset. Okay, so why is that important? How does that impact us in our daily lives? So glad you asked. It helps us bring peak performance. We are in our most effective accomplishment and achievement mode when we have the mental fitness muscles to grow upon. It brings us peace of mind and overall well-being and wellness, as well as healthy relationships with ourselves and others. So key as we build these mental muscles. So the research foundation, and there's a lot of it, is the synthesis, how we began to do this work in this world of mental fitness and building mental fitness, is the synthesis of key breakthroughs in 4 different areas of science, being neuroscience, cognitive behavioral science, positive psychology, which tells us what we're doing wrong, and performance science, which tells us what we're doing right. And so researchers and the founder of this work, Shirzad Chamine, I'll talk about him in a moment, and his team have combined and interwoven these areas of science to develop the terminology of positive intelligence, PQ for short. I'm going to talk a lot about that. So the research that's been done includes results from hundreds of CEOs and their executive teams, primarily around peak performance in the workplace. Hundreds of Stanford students have been a part of this research and how they navigate building these 3 critical core muscles. World-class athletes all over the globe in every area of sports and over 500,000 participants in over 50 countries. So it's widely researched, widely accepted. The research has been summarized in the New York Times best-selling book, Positive Intelligence, authored by professor and researcher Shirzad Sharmi, who's the founder of the Positive Intelligence program. Amy, I'm hearing some background. Someone's not muted. If that could happen, that'd be great. So this is the book, Positive Intelligence. That is a summary of a lot of the research, but it also offers tons of other information. I've read it. I recommend it to countless numbers of people in my life, clients, etc. And we'll talk about that. So part of how the genesis of this work and this body of knowledge that teaches us about mental fitness is the power of factor analysis. So bear with me for a moment. So this is the science undergirding. And the power of factor analysis is that it discovers the root cause of whatever the study is. And it discovers such the root cause that it results in what we call radical simplification, taking something to the very bone, bare bone of the genesis of our origin. So a fun example of this is when we think about colors, the colors of the palette, the colors of the rainbow, is that but at the root of thousands of colors, and we all have an affinity to colors. When you think about all the colors in the color palette, there are only 3 factors that be the genesis of that, and that's blue, red, and green. From those 3 colors, you can create thousands of other colors. So that shows you how stripping it down, the color, to the very bare bone helps us to look at the root cause or the root origin of that. So why do we do that? So the results of fact analysis research that has been found through this study, the Positive Intelligence studies, shows us that there are 3 core muscles that are at the root of mental fitness. So the first one is our saboteur interceptor. The saboteur interceptor, we're going to talk about that. Number 2 is the sage perspective. And number 3 is self-command. These are all the core muscles in our brain that helps us to build on mental fitness, which is the undergirding to navigating a life of a growth mindset and ease and flow. So there are 10 saboteurs. There are 10 saboteurs. These are nasty characters. They are voices in our head that create negative energy, negative emotion. They are the self-doubter, the avoider, the controller. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but there's 10, and there's 10 that's been identified. On the other side of our brain, there are 5 sage powers that helps us be calm and have clear-headed reason and take laser-focused action and help us navigate with joy and calm through our lives. But there is a master saboteur, the very master saboteur that we all have, which is the nasty of nastiest saboteurs, is the judge. So we all have the judge because we always have these voices in our head that is judging, that we have the self-judge, which is judging ourselves, who says, to ourselves, how in the world could you have done this? How could you have been so stupid? What were you thinking? Those voices that we hear, the not kind voices that we hear that plague us through our day and our lives. The second judge is that of the judging others, when we find fault and judgment and criticism in the action, the behavior of others. And so it's like, in your relationships, your work relationships, maybe your spouse, why does he do that? It drives me crazy. Why in the world does he not see the way that I see and do the things the right way? Those voices, that's our judge. And then thirdly, it is our circumstances, the situations and circumstances that we say to ourselves in our inner talk of, why in the world can he or she do something different? Or why in the world does, nobody like me? Or why in the world, that they're not doing this right? Or this situation has to change. I'm under too much pressure. I can't achieve what I want to do. And I can't be happy until XYZ is done. So it's the circumstances and situations in our life that we're constantly judging that plague us and plague our mind, which is a tremendous saboteur in our lives. And so to describe a little bit about the saboteurs that we have, usually we have, everyone has the judge. We're always judging, but there are these, what we call 9 accomplice saboteurs that are competing for headspace, so to speak. So we have the controller, the hyperachiever, the restless, the stickler, the pleaser, the hypervigilant, the avoider, the victim, and the hyper-rational. These accomplice saboteurs are kind of in cahoots with our judge saboteur to create the ongoing negative emotion, the negativity, the stress and anxiety in our life, and causes us to be derailed from living a life of ease and flow. So that we're going to talk about now, about how do we intercept those voices, because this practice of positive intelligence has a very direct linear approach of how to do that. And so how we intercept the saboteur is we first have we take what we call a saboteur assessment. It's like a 5-minute online assessment. We answer questions, and the output of that is results such as this. So James, the client, we see on a scale of 1 to 10 where we're ranking as far as which saboteurs are kind of running the show in our headspace, and how they're holding us back and sabotaging us through having a growth mindset and living a more peaceable life. And so James here, there's someone still who's not on mute. Aside from me, I'm hearing a lot of interfering noise in the background. So James here, his top 3 saboteurs is the controller, avoider, and the hypervigilant. So when I work with James, for example, and have him focus on those top 3 saboteurs, it deflates the power of the others. And so while we may have bits and pieces of others, because we are 3-dimensional beings, it's primarily the top 3 accomplice saboteurs that, if we can focus on building mental muscle around, will be converted into the sage perspective. And so how do we do that? Through taking the assessment, we are given a list of explanations and descriptions of what it looks like to be, say, in stickler mode. That constant drive for perfectionism, need for order and organization taken too far. And that's a great point about our saboteurs, is that, of the saboteurs that we may have, that may be the primary accomplice saboteurs, not all of them are all bad, just like, not everything is all bad, is that it's only when they're taken too far that they pull us into that state of negative emotion. So this is like putting up a wanted poster, like for a criminal, when you post a poster that says this is a wanted this criminal. So we have a better sense, a quicker sense of when we're moving into the saboteur, like a stickler or the pleaser, of taking over and controlling and bringing us into negative emotion, that we can recognize that faster and quicker, and it moves us out of that. And we do practice around that, which I'm going to speak about in a few moments, to move us out of that saboteur perspective and into the sage perspective. And so it's a roadmap to help us move from the saboteur to the sage. So I would ask, of the saboteurs, where and how do you see your saboteurs? Rhetorical question. We all have them. They show up at different times, different places in our lives, but it's only through the recognition and identification of those saboteurs, that we can begin to practice and make that shift, that very critical pivot to sage perspective. So the sage saboteurs sabotage us. They are the ones that are saying, why don't you do this better? Or I'm so scared, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to, make this presentation, or I'm not going to be able to complete this project. I'm not qualified enough. So the saboteurs motivate us through negative emotions, through fear and stress and anger and guilt, shame, insecurity, the negative emotions. The sage, on the other hand, motivates us through positive emotions. Very, very different part of the brain that we're lighting up when this happens. And they, motivate us through positive emotions of empathy and curiosity and creativity and passion and purpose, and having us move back to that center, to a more calm and joyful state. And it really, if you were to put your brain in an MRI, when you see this process, it literally lights up different parts of our brain to be able to navigate and to function in a more sense of ease and flow. Our saboteurs, that people ask me all the time, and the research shows, but the saboteurs are what propel me. That's what motivates me to accomplish and to be a high achiever and to move me forward in my life. Aren't these good for me? The answer could be, yeah, they can help you generate success through, all the inner talk that's pushing you and propelling you and threatening you and, and exploiting your kindness and all those things, but it's not going to generate happiness. You might get where you're going from a technical tactician point, but you're not going to enjoy the ride. You're not going to enjoy the hike up the mountain. You're not going to enjoy the climb up the ladder. The sage, however, generates our highest success while sustaining happiness, because we're in a very different place. We're in a very calmer place, a place of empathy and a place of navigation and curiosity and creativity. Very different way of operating and moving through our lives and our work and our careers and our relationships. So oftentimes clients ask, but aren't negative emotions good for us? Aren't they good for us? Because of the way that they can propel us, however the means and whatever the talk. You think about the stress and the anxiety and the self-doubt and the inner critic and all the fears, all those negative emotions. Yeah, they can push us forward, but at what cost? So I want to ask a similar parallel question and a related question, and that is pain good for us? Negative emotion, pain. Negative emotion causes pain, inner emotional pain, mental pain. So we think about, well, is pain good for us? When we think about, does pain benefit us? And we think about maybe if we were to happen to put our hand on a hot stove, would pain be good for us? Of course, pain would be good for us. Because why? Because it would tell us that we need to get our hand off the hot stove. But the question is, until we can answer that question and we can move ourselves, our hands off the hot stove, we don't want to keep our hand on the hot stove that's going to burn our hand to the bone. But the question is, how long does it take us to get the message that we don't need to be in pain, that we need to take our hand off the hot stove? You see the analogy, right? In circumstances in our lives, you see the analogy. So the answer is negative emotions. Yes, they can serve a purpose, but they're only helpful for 1 second as an alert signal that something's not quite right, that something needs to be righted, that we need to recenter ourselves into more positive emotion, into the sage space that's going to help move us into a more positive place. Because when we stay in negative emotion, it certainly hampers our ability to see clearly and respond with those sage powers of empathy, curiosity, creativity, and laser focused action, which are so important. So the negative emotion really equals our saboteurs. And it's very important to understand that, because we have that happening all the time, all day, every day. But when we recognize that through the practice, through the PQ practice, then we can move ourselves and pivot into that sage perspective, which creates and helps us build those mental fitness muscles, which gives us that positive and growth mindset that we can have and sustain and not be interrupted and hijacked by those saboteurs. So that's the saboteur interceptor is the first core muscle. The second core muscle we want to talk about and think about building moving forward is our sage muscles and how we do that. So the sage is the region of our brain that's associated with positive emotions, peace and calm, clear-headed focus, creativity, and allows us to see the big picture of our lives and to keep things into perspective. And so that helps us. And when we move into that area, it helps us operate and navigate our lives from a calmer place, from the sage perspective, where we can live with ease and flow, much calmer, sustainable way. So the sage perspective informs us that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity. This is not Pollyanna stuff. This is what that the factor analysis of the research has shown, and I'm going to share with you my story as an example. So I began my legal marketing career in 1991 at a very large law firm in the Philadelphia region. I had no legal background. I'm not a lawyer. I am at the core a corporate marketing communications specialist. That is the core competency of my professional journey. So I was in my first law firm, and I had some pretty hefty assignments. And over the next 23 years, or 20 years, I should say, I navigated from one law firm to another law firm to another law firm. I started a program that was non-existent of their marketing department for a mid-sized firm in the Philadelphia region. But I never felt like it was good enough. I don't know if anybody can relate, that whole good enough demon that some of us have, some of us don't. But for me, my hyperachiever saboteur, my controller saboteur, and the judge of myself was running the show. So despite my accolades, my professional accolades, the awards that I won, the books that I've published, the speaking tours that I've been on, all of the professional things, the victories were hollow because my judge was telling me, and my hyperachiever was pushing me for more, because it's not good enough. You can do more. You can make more money. You can have a better title. And I did indeed top out as chief marketing officer for a multi-hundred attorney corporate law firm here in the area, but it wasn't good enough. Until one day at my last position, I was leading the firm through a historical campaign program that they had never in the history of the firm been a part of. And the managing partner announced to me that my services were no longer needed at the firm. What? I mean, everything was going well. I thought I was respected. I was on the management committee. I was part of business strategy as it led the firm forward. And out of nowhere, with no warning, my services were no longer needed. Some of us can relate to that. We've been downsized, we've been laid off, we've had enough of the nonsense. But at the time, it was very devastating to me. I was a single woman. I was self-supporting. What in the world was I going to do? This was so horrible. How could this happen to me? I was doing all the right things. So what is that? So I asked myself, which is true? Was this a horrible, horrible thing that happened to me? How in the world could they do this to me? I was doing a fabulous job. I got wonderful feedback. I had wonderful reviews. Or was this a gift for me? Through that experience, I started KLA Marketing Associates. So many of us in this room today that will be listening later can probably relate to the concept of pivoting, of having something horrible happen, and then we making something good from it. What is the gift? So the answer to the question, which perspective is true, it really depends on what you believe is true. It's how we perceive what happens to us, not necessarily what happens. And we can apply that to many, many aspects in our lives, in our work, in our relationships. When we think something so horrible has happened, but then in the rearview mirror, it was the greatest gift. That is the concept of the sage. So the sage perspective, again, realizes and assumes and accepts that every outcome and circumstance can be converted to a gift and opportunity. So that's our second core muscle that we want to talk about. Our third core muscle that we want to talk about is the self-command muscle. So self-command, I'm going to use an example, is how we build the muscle. So like, for example, if I want to build my biceps, I can just lift these muscle on these barbells, these weights, and do multiple reps until I build up these biceps. Very similar and true with the self-command mode, and the core muscle is building our brain, building our mental fitness, that core mental muscle that we build through what we call PQ reps. PQ reps. So I want to get some audience participation if for just a few moments, in 10 seconds actually. If I thought I could take my stop my screen, I would. I'm going to try to do this. Stop sharing and come on video. And I'd like for each of us to gently rub together 2 fingertips. Gently rub together. If you close your eyes and rub your fingertips just gently enough where you can feel the ridges of the fingertips. Just gently enough where you can feel the ridges of the fingertips. So this is about 10 seconds. What happens in that? We know that we stop thinking about everything else. We know that we're focused on feeling the ridges of our fingertips. This is 1 10-second, what we call PQ, positive intelligent quotient rep. As part of building our core mental muscle, we follow this practice to build our sage perspective that can be applied in every aspect of our lives, can be applied in the middle of crises, in the middle of those stinking corporate boardroom meetings where someone's driving you out of your brain. You can do these PQ reps. There's hundreds of ways to do them. I know that in mindfulness training and meditation, there's techniques maybe similar, but there's hundreds of ways to do this. But in the positive intelligence program, there's a very multiple ways using our senses of touch and sound and breath, which is so important, and with my fellow meditators know. And it helps us build our mental muscles similar to what we would build with our physical muscles. And so that's the self-command muscle, the third mental muscle. So the simplicity is in the operating system. So we know that if you're feeling negative emotion, you need to just stop. Just stop where you are, because you're in the saboteur mode. Remember we talked about the hand on the hot stove. If we're feeling negative emotion for more than a second, we know that we've been hijacked by one of our saboteurs. So we just need to stop. Do some PQ reps to quiet those saboteurs and to activate our sage powers of calm and creativity and curiosity and innovate powers. Very powerful. Accept that the sage perspective can be in every circumstance or problem can be converted into a gift and opportunity. That's transformational change of thinking and feeling. Transformational. When we practice this on an ongoing basis, it is transformational. And we generate the gift by using sage powers like the empathy and curiosity and creativity and calm, which creates that clear-headed action and laser focus. We use that over and over again in the practice of building our self-command muscle of the 3 muscles. So the question is it really possible to just shift from saboteur mode to sage response, even in the most challenging of circumstances and times? If you think about the worst thing that possibly could happen, is it possible to pivot, to shift from saboteur to sage mode in response? And the answer is absolutely. So the speed and depth of the shift depends on the mental muscle strength. So ladies, isn't it always the case? Practice, practice, practice. How often are we going to the gym? How often are we doing the PQ reps? And that's the beauty of the program of positive intelligence, is leading us to take our hand off the proverbial stove quicker, shut down those negative emotions, and shift to the sage perspective through the building of our self-command mental muscle and strengthening that. So lasting positive change, one of the things that I'll say is that, well, I'm sure everyone can relate to going to CLE programs or, any type of seminars or webinars, maybe even like this, is that, you think, oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm learning so much. I can see the perspective now. Oh, I can do this. I'm going to make these changes. But what happens is when we go back and we insert ourselves back into our daily busy lives, the insight we may have, but what are we applying it? How are we applying it? Particularly, when we're in our silos and our, working from home, or we're in isolation, or, we have busy family lives. So what we found through the factor analysis research is that lasting positive change, comes with 20% insight, the new knowledge that we're gaining, but 80% of the mental muscle building that we do on a daily basis. And given that we're all so busy, it's a wonderful thing that this program, it does, the success of the program and what I'm talking about building mental fitness and, switching over to the sage perspective that allows us to live and navigate and operate our lives in a sense of ease and flow. While it does require intense practice, that practice is 15 minutes a day for 6 to 8 weeks initially, because we have to get rid of all of the spider webs in our mind and how the saboteurs have taken up residence for all of our lives that have been hijacking us with negative emotion that is keeping us from being in that growth mindset. And so, we think about that is that you can't defeat a gang of 10 bandits by sending one new fighter per day for 100 days, because the other side's going to win. So we have to immerse ourselves in the practice to get rid of those saboteurs and those spider webs that are in our mind that have been there for a very long time. So the positive intelligence gift is the gift of growth. So our initial program is 8 weeks. We have everything functions from an app that you download. that we watch a 1-hour weekly video that's divided into incremental sections. Like usually it's like 15 minutes divided into 6 or 7, 8 or minute sections that help us reprogram our brain to move us out of that saboteur mode and into the sage mode. And then we have a number of different PQ rep exercises of practice that you can do 2 minutes at a time. They're usually no more than 2 minutes throughout your day to help to shift the saboteur mode into the sage perspective and build that mental muscle. The building those mental muscles are so incredibly, it's pivotal. I mean, it's absolutely imperative to move us into sustainable mental fitness, building that mental muscle and that growth mindset. It takes practice, 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 but we don't do this alone at all. And then reading the first chapters of the Positive Intelligence book, which outline in more detail and go and do a deeper dive into the saboteurs. And so you can better understand what your saboteurs are, how they operate, how sneaky they are, how they hijack you in the most worst opportune time, and how to shut them down. And then you receiving the PQ support through the app for a year. And so one of the things that we do is that we gather together in what we call pods. And so we gather in pod groups where at the end of a week, after we've all had an opportunity to watch the weekly video, which gives us the new material and the new insights into saboteurs and sage, and then we have a discussion about that. And so we're doing this in a group setting, having accountability partners, and over time you have the power in your hands, so to speak. You've got the power on your device because you have the app that you access multiple times a day to listen 2 minutes to these PQ reps and to build the mental muscles that we've spoken about, shutting down or intercepting our saboteurs, which hijack us, building the sage muscle and sage perspective, and practicing that through building the self-command of mental muscle. So, that is a lifetime of study, decades of practice as far as how we move and master our moving into growth mindset through the girding of building mental fitness through our muscles. So that is my program, and my offer to you as a member of WAL, a fellow member of WAL, is, if you have an interest, to grab a few minutes time of my calendar. If you want to save your spot, we're starting a new pod group in the beginning of November. Our deadline to register is the end of October. And you would need to have participation with at least one accountability partner. So when we're not online together, you can keep each other on track. And that really helps you to keep the practice going. So I would be happy to take any questions. It's exciting stuff. It has transformed my life.
Kimberly,
yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I actually really loved it. It was so helpful. My question is, how do you know when you're having negative emotions? I mean, I'm a pretty sensitive person, and I'm in touch overall, I think, with my feelings. But at times, I find that I have negative emotions about circumstances or people or whatever. I'm thinking of one occurrence recently, and that's running around in my mind maybe for, who knows, an hour, 2 hours, while I'm doing other things before I even realize, oh, that is negative, man. That is negative. That is not good for me or anybody else. I must get better at, being aware, heightening awareness. And that's my question. How do you have any tips for heightening awareness to spot them immediately, spot negative emotions immediately?
Absolutely. Great question, Janet. How do we spot the negative emotion to move us out of that the rumination that we women tend to do, that spirals our inner talk and then our behavior and our opinion. So that goes back to, how long do we need to feel the negative emotion and the pain that it causes? And the science shows us we only need that negative emotion for 1 minute because it tells us something's not right. And how to short circuit that is through these PQ reps, and practicing, because that centers our brain. It actually rewrites in the frontal cortex of our brain, these over in our brain, it rewrites our propensity to stay in negative emotion. So that's how our the self assessment helps us, is to identify what our saboteurs are and how they cause the negative emotion, and helps us recognize, the lies and illusions that they tell us by shutting them down, by doing the PQ reps and getting into more of a positive mindset that it brings us through that stage perspective.
Thank you.
Certainly. Anyone else? Questions, comments? What are we learning? I'd love to hear from the group. If you want to turn your cameras on, I would love to see your beautiful smiling faces. What have you learned? Is there anything that you've learned this morning that you didn't know before?
I can say what I learned. I learned that this is a muscle that can be addressed and exercised in a very specific way, with really a reasonable amount of time dedicated to it. It's not something that has to take over your entire schedule. I would love the reminder, it's time to just stop for 5 minutes and get back in touch, basically, is the way I would kind of see it.
A great point. And one of the things about the PQ reps, and which short circuits our negative emotion, is, for example, on the app, and I've been in this, and do this every single day, is I receive a notification 3 times a day to stop 9, 12 o'clock, and 3 for 2 minutes, for just 2 minutes. And so if we're in a meeting, when I get the notification, you can literally do it in the middle of a meeting, right? In the middle of a meeting, you don't have to excuse yourself and go somewhere. You can do it in real time, in real life, which short circuits those saboteurs from hijacking you. Great. Anyone else?
Hi, Yes, me. Hi, Kimberly. How are you? I just wanted to thank you. What a wonderful presentation. And these are really skills that you don't really think about them until someone like you gives you the tools to really start thinking about them. And I'm going to leave myself a little notes so that I'll make sure I do my exercises when my saboteurs start creeping in. This was really great. Thank you so much for your time and information.
Oh, it's great that you joined us today. What a pleasant surprise. Thank you.
Kimberly, do you want to put your contact information in the chat so everyone can see it and take it down? Because I know it was on your last slide.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add that everything was great. Learned so much, and just especially, it just reminds me of that saying that the greatest battle you'll ever fight is the one between your ears. And so anyway, I really appreciated it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is. And, and because of that, our brain, nobody really talks about our brain and how we need to protect our brain, and we have to build the brain muscles, until, things happen in our daily lives that totally hijack us and take us into a place that's not positive, that doesn't help with our relationships with ourselves or others or our circumstances, and we're constantly judging ourselves. And it's just a negative spiral until we can say, no, this is not going to happen. I can tell you that in 15 months, I mean, I've been working in growth mindset and mindset work, and we do that in our Change Makers program. But this body of work through positive intelligence, I can tell you, my controller is more relaxed. I let go and am more accepting of what I may not know and don't have control over. My hyperachiever, it's not pushing me so hard. But I think one of the greatest gifts of this in this daily practice is recognizing when those saboteurs are activating me and putting me into a negative emotion state that's not healthy for me or anybody else that I'm around. So that's a tremendous learning that I have. I can see the transformation in my own life, in the lives of our clients. So I'll leave you with, thinking about today, and I again appreciate everyone coming out, is how would you apply what you've learned today? As a rhetorical question. How would you apply what you've learned today and to your daily life, and how you can spot those saboteurs and of the judge and the overachiever, hyperachiever, the pleaser that we were marred on, or the restless, or the sticker. I mean, women have a propensity of the perfectionistic. Oh my God, we have to be perfect. Who's going to think of us? What are other people going to think? I mean, these constant, endless loops, or the hyper rational. This just doesn't make sense to me because life doesn't always make sense. Or the hyper vigilant, the intense and inclusive focus on rational thinking. So it is, these are all real and they impact us every day. So hopefully with the information that I presented, the programs that we run, that is going to be useful for you to transform your life through the practice. So I appreciate your interest and your attendance.
And we thank you, Kimberly, for today's presentation. I hope that everyone appreciated it and enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for future topics or speakers, or if you yourself are interested in presenting as part of our series, you can reach out to me at ahansel@wardgreenberg.com, and I'll put my contact information in the chat box. If you have any questions or need to follow up with Kimberly, her information is there as well. And we thank everyone for joining us today. Bye all.